The town of Mayfield wasn't on most maps. You had to zoom in real close on digital ones, and even then it might not show unless you knew what to type. A single blinking light served as its only real traffic control, and half the buildings downtown. Hadn't seen tenants since the mid-90s, but what Mayfield lacked in population, it made up for in secrets packed deep into its dry Texas soil, beneath the crumbling Baptist church, beneath the elementary school with its long-shuttered east wing, beneath homes where the windows stayed dark year-round but the lawns were always mysteriously trimmed out. My Uncle Ray moved to Mayfield after the oil field accident, said he needed peace, said his nerves couldn't handle Houston anymore. My mom said it was his way of disappearing without actually dying. He rented a tiny place near the old feed store and started driving the school bus, though there weren't many kids to pick up. When I got expelled for the second time, Mom sent me to live with him. Sighed I needed structure, discipline. What I found was something else entirely. The first thing I noticed about Mayfield was how quiet it was at night. Not peaceful quiet, unnatural. Quiet. No crickets, no distant highway hum, not even the whine of a mosquito. Just silence, thick and oppressive, like the town had sunk into the earth and buried itself alive. Uncle Ray didn't talk much about the town, and when he did, it was always about how lucky I was to be somewhere safe. He kept the doors locked even during the day and never let me go out after sunset. This town gets strange at night. He told me once, eyes fixed on the horizon like he expected something to rise from it. The second thing I noticed was how everyone watched each other. In the diner, at the gas station, in the pews of the church on Sundays. People whispered more than they spoke, and their eyes darted constantly like they were waiting for someone or something to show up. There were no teenagers either, just children under 10 and adults over 30. I asked my uncle about that once, and he told me they all left for college and never came back. The way he said it didn't sound like a lie, but it didn't sound like the truth either. One day, while riding my uncle's bus with him for lack of anything else to do, I noticed something strange. There was a dirt road about 5 miles out of town that led into a dense grove of trees. Nothing unusual about that in Texas, but every time we passed it, Uncle Ray would glance at it in the mirror and then press his foot harder on the gas. "Ain't nothing good down that way," he muttered once when I asked. The kids on the bus didn't even look in its direction. It was like their little heads knew to pretend it didn't exist. That night, while Ray was passed out in his recliner, I took his spare keys and drove back out there. I don't know what I was expecting, some abandoned cabin, maybe some weird backwoods squatters, but what I found made the hairs on my arms stand up the second I stepped out of the truck. The trees weren't right. Too tall, too straight, too quiet. Their bark was almost black, and the air was thick and humid like I'd stepped into a swamp even though it hadn't rained in weeks. I walked about 100 yards in before I found the clearing dot. In the center of it stood a stone circle, 7 pillars about 5 feet tall, each carved with symbols that looked older than anything I'd seen outside a museum. Some were faded, worn by wind and time, but others were fresh, almost recently etched. And in the middle of the circle was a hole about the size of a manhole descending into blackness. There was no ladder, no steps, just a shaft down into the earth. I crouched near it, trying to peer inside, and that's when I heard the whisper. It didn't come from the trees. It came from the hole. A low, raspy voice just on the edge of understanding, like someone mumbling from under a floorboard. I couldn't make out words, but the cadence of it felt familiar, rhythmic. A chant. I don't know how long I stayed there listening, but the longer I did, the more wrong I felt. Like something in my blood was being stirred, like an old memory. Was being forced to the surface, except it wasn't mine. I ran. When I got back to the truck, Uncle Ray was there, out of breath, furious and afraid. He grabbed my shirt and shook me. "You don't go there." You don't ever go there. Do you understand me? That place is not for people like you." When I asked him what he meant, he let me go and sat on the bumper, hands shaking. He told me. Then, in a voice that cracked with every syllable, about what the town had buried. About the 7 families who founded Mayfield and the deal they made. About how each family had to sacrifice one child, just one, every generation to keep something sealed beneath the ground. Some called it a demon, others a god. All they knew was that if they didn't feed it, it would rise. He said it had been that way for over 100 years. He said it was his turn once, but his brother took his place. My father. I didn't believe him. Not fully. Not until I started noticing the signs. The way some kids vanished without a trace. No police reports, no flyers. Just gone, and the town moved on. The way no one said their names again. The way their homes were quietly sold, their rooms emptied overnight. One morning I woke up and Uncle Ray was gone. No note. No sign of struggle. Just gone. I searched everywhere, even that cursed grove. The circle was empty, the hole covered. In freshly disturbed soil. I wanted to leave after that, but the town wouldn't let me. Not literally, they didn't chain me up or block the roads. But every time I packed my things and tried to leave, something would stop me. The truck wouldn't start. A storm would hit. The sheriff would show up and say there was some business I needed to handle first. And then one night, a knock. Came on the door. It was the pastor. A thin man with gray skin and cold eyes. He said it was time I gave back. Time I honored my family's part of the deal. I told him I wasn't staying. He smiled like he'd heard that 100 times before. That night I packed light and tried to walk out of town. Didn't even bother with the roads, just cut straight through fields and fences. I made it 10 miles before I collapsed in the dirt, gasping. Every breath felt like glass, every step heavier than the last. Something in the air. Something in the land. I turned around and the town lights were right behind me, like I'd never left. It's been 3 years. I drive the bus now. Keep the doors locked. Don't talk much. I watch the kids in the mirror and pray none of them are next. I don't. Knowing they'll call on me, but I know it's coming. You can only hide from Mayfield's secrets for so long before it digs you up and reminds you who you really belong to.